Expectancy violation is something that I mentioned and will mention quite often because I consider this term to a great degree key for any reasonable text perception analysis, even though the term itself wasn't introduced, as I've already said, in the field of linguistics or text perception theory or literature. It was actually introduced in between 1976 and 1978, thanks to a series of experiments carried out in the field of socio-linguistics, or let's say social and behavioral sciences by Judee Burgoon. There is a brief interview with her on YouTube on it, back from the 80s or from the late 70s. The experiment basically consisted in evaluating an individual's reactions to certain types of personalities, where assumption was made how these people would react to this or that kind of personality that, let's say, generally, objectively would be considered, again, based on some generalized or shared cultural or civilizational experience or evaluation, as rather attractive or rather, let's say, discouraging or not attractive. What counts mostly, and what, in my opinion, can be basically generalized or universally used for any kind of interaction, because it's basically interaction. What she spoke about, what we speak about, all text production in the broadest sense by the author, and its reception or perception by its perceiver or receiver of such text or reader, can be umbrelled by this term, interaction, communication. What I find so important about her experiment and the knowledge it brought by is, first of all, this term and its explanation, expectancy violation. That implies the fact that we all enter interaction with certain expectations. Expectations is at the same time something the author assumes us to have when he is creating a text more or less intended for us, for our kind of readers, receivers, perceivers, whatever. And that's the moment where it's up to him to decide where to fulfill our expectations and where not to fulfill them. I mean, where to violate them. And that's basically it in this dimension of the author's strategy and his approaching the text creation, because apart from its content, I mean, about what the text is about, in fact, that to a certain point interacts with what is called like form and we can approve of the fact that there is a distinction between content and form, and we can say that no, they're both interconnected and they're basically the two sides of the same coin, and so on. Then there is, beside these two, or one thing, two things composing one whole, content and form, there is basically this third thing, which is the author's time plan in terms of what concerns the reader's perception of his texts, and namely where within this time plan he will put expectancy violations or deviations from the norm, which means deviations from what he thinks based on his knowledge or assumption of how the reader is, where he will put stimuli that will most likely, as long as his evaluation of the reader or perceiver of his text is correct, that will most likely lead to the production of, or triggering creation of an arousal or a series of arousal in the recipient of his text, and in which places, on the contrary, within his text, he will stay conform to the norm, which means, in other words, where he will fulfill the reader's expectations. Of course, this game is a very, I'd say, tricky, minutious, detailed, and refined, because sometimes, and there are overlaps, of course, because many times the author basically lures the reader into expecting something, and then, in order to eventually violate these expectations, not fulfill them. Again, when doing so, when luring him in, he obviously needs to most probably use such tactics or expressions, words, strategy that will create an expectation in the reader that things will go this or that way, which means in such cases the author basically fulfills his expectations in order to come up with something that will more or less abruptly, surprisingly, violate them. And it's not only, when it comes to art, it's not only these major, main, huge key points or milestones of the text that, like catharsis or like a plot culmination, that obviously or are obvious to do so, but more, let's say, detailed or refined texts, as I'm convinced, contain many more subtle, refined slips of the norm of this kind that basically either keep the perceiver constantly on alert or interested, or his attention attached to this or that detail, the whole thing, and his brain continuously triggered by corresponding or author desired feelings or reactions that in some cases lead to artistic, aesthetic experience. But which, no matter their size or quality or time length, are still of the same principle or working on the same mechanism, which is the expectancy, either non-violation or violation. This duality between expectancy, non-violation, and violation is, in fact, the efficient agent thanks to which not only does the text go forward, which obviously means is further or forwardly perceived by its perceiver, who this way confirms his will to willingly, deliberately follow it, because it gives him the feelings that are welcomed. So not only it moves the text forward, but it also